Let me start by introducing our two panellists today, Mark Colvin, otherwise known as @Colvinius, and Catherine Devaney, otherwise known as @Catherine Devaney. Mark describes himself as, quote, a lifetime Lance Corporal in the Awkward Squad. But he is, in fact, as we all know, one of the living national treasures of Australian journalism. He started out as a radio cadet who went on to bring events such as the Iran hostage crisis, the rise of solidarity in the Gorbachev era to us all as an ABC foreign correspondent. Then in 1984, he contracted a rare blood disease when in Rwanda.
94, not 1984.
94? I've got it written here, 94.
Oh, right.
When he was in Rwanda and Zaire, that nearly took his life. That may have curtailed his foreign correspondent days, but for the last 15 years we all know him so well as the presenter of the ABC's flagship current affairs program, PM. As @Colvinius, he was one of the first to move Auntie along from its cuttings library era and embrace the internet. He's one of the most prolific Twitter users in Australia, having posted more than 50,000 tweets and I looked it up.
I know, it's true.
And attracted what is approaching 25,000 cyberspace followers. You may not know that the Library of Congress is archiving every tweet ever sent, and I'm reliably informed that there's a dedicated cyber shelf just for @Colvinius. Would you please welcome Mark Colvin? Now, Catherine Devaney also, I understand, has a dedicated cyber shelf in the Library of Congress, but part of it may be restricted to those of us who are easily offended. Catherine's Twitter site describes her as, and I quote, a writer, so-called comedian and social commentator with a thing for IT guys.
True.
She has an extensive background in television and radio, but it was as a columnist that she honed her skills as a professional polemicist and general pain in the ass. Her one-woman show at the Melbourne Comedy Festival was called God is Bull, That's the Good News, which of course immediately sold out. For the better part of a decade, Catherine's columns in The Age challenged and entertained in equal measure, leading to book publication in not one but 3 volumes, the first of which was titled It's Not My Fault They Print Them. And then Catherine discovered Twitter's capacity to take the offensorati to a whole new level. Her 2010 tweets about the Anzacs, about people who have flags in their front yards, and finally about Bindi Irwin lost her gig at The Age. But undaunted, Catherine continues to write, speak, perform, and at times still offend, on subjects ranging from sex to dyslexia, from atheism to asylum seekers. More recently, she has become acquainted with the legal department at Twitter over comments that she made about Cardinal George Pell. Would you please welcome Catherine Devaney?
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to start by asking each of you your experience of picking up social media, and particularly Twitter. How did you come to embrace and use the technology? How has your use changed, and how important is it to the work that you do today? Catherine, would you like to start?
I remember being at a party in 2009 and somebody saying, oh, are you on Twitter? And I'm going, what's that? He said, well, it's just something where you say kind of stuff in 140 characters and people listen to you. And I just thought, why would anyone want to do that? But what happened was at the end of 2009, I decided to do this one-woman show called God is Bull. And my producer, Carla Burt, said, you have to get on Twitter. And I said, what is that again and why? So, well, you need to get, it's a great way to advertise and to get your audience. So you basically have your own news channel, which has got, you know, comedy, news, information, whatever, insights into life, and then you get them on board and they're all listening and you can tell them when your show's on. And was telling me stories about, Will Anderson being able to sell out shows in 25 minutes just by tweeting them out. So I thought it was a great idea. So I started doing it, and it was fun because I've always been a huge fan of, SMSs, passing notes, letters, graffiti. I really love kind of anything that can go on a postcard, either side. So it was really a good fit for how I like to communicate. And human nature doesn't change, but technology does. So it was just like, this is what I've always done, but in different fits and starts. So I think that there was a really amazing moment for me at the start of 2010, leading up to God is Bull, and also me finishing at The Age. And I wasn't sacked for tweets. That's incorrect. They've been trying to get rid of me for quite some time, and they couldn't sack me for my writing. And there's lots and lots of video footage of me for probably the year before at events like this, people asking me about my relationship with The Age, and I've said if they had their opportunity, they would stone me and kill me, and they would call it an honour killing. And people have come up to me in the street saying, wow, when you said that, I thought you were mucking around. I said, no, it's true. But with that, I also don't think that anyone should be allowed to have a column for more than 2 years, because we want new voices out there. So I was not sacked, but liberated. I think that there was a moment for me which really stood out, was when I changed, when you open your computer and it just goes to the page you set, and when I changed it from The Age to Twitter. And it wasn't about, and it was when I woke up in the morning getting the curated good links of information and stories that had, come to me through trusted sources. And I remember that moment being quite profound, actually changing it from, theage.com to twitter.com. And so now I use it as a scratching pad. I use it as just a bit of fun, I never censor myself. I say exactly what I think. I've only ever tweeted, I've only ever deleted one tweet, and that was the one about George Pell, and only because I wanted to shame him and humiliate him. And it's just, and it keeps evolving, and Twitter's not going to be there forever, and I'm kind of fascinated by what's going to take over from it. So now it's just a part of my life. It's just bizarre any technology I've ever gotten. I remember getting a laptop and people saying, well, do you want to go on the internet? And I'm just going, why would I want to do that? So, well, you can send emails to people, and go, but why wouldn't you just ring them up? So anytime I've ever got a piece of technology, I have never known what I'd be using it for by the time I considered it obsolete. So when I got this phone, I remember thinking, wow, this is what I'm using it for, and by the time I'm finished with it, I'm going to be using it for something different. So yeah, it's a part of my life and everybody else's life, and it's taking over from other things, and I think it's got pros and cons. So that's my story.
Right, so a bit like passing notes in class, except to 13,000 people.
Yeah, the people who want to tune in.
Yeah, and Mark, we've had quite a strong response already to your number of followers. It's very intimidating. Somebody's tweeted saying he has 25,000 followers and I have 185.
Thanks for that.
I'm with you,
but
I think.
It's not the number of followers. It's never been the number of followers for me. I started off at the beginning of 2009, I think probably about February 2009, and I just mucked around with it for a little while. I remember quite early on I was just experimenting with it. I found a site that had a lot of haikus by Basho, who's one of the great Japanese poets, and I then was going and finding photographs that seemed to me to work with the haiku, and then I would just, post that. And I was doing silly things like that, little jokes as well. And then I was I had a bit of an accident and had some fairly major surgery in April 2009, and so I was bedridden for a little while, and that was when I really started to sort of see it as something else. And I started, I've always been, I'm a very lucky person in that I have one of those jobs where they actually pay you to read a lot. And I've always read a lot, around newspapers, magazines. Obviously, I read books as well. But there was always a lot of stuff that I wanted to share with other people. Because I read in the New Yorker or, the Atlantic or various British publications, I read French newspapers as well. It's harder to tweet those, people get annoyed. But, I had all this stuff, and I used to quite often send it off in emails to my friends. But it just struck me that this was a really good thing to do. And I also was following people who did the same thing, tweeted links to interesting stories. And the more of them that I saw, the more also, it's one of those things that grows like Topsy. You find people who do the same things you do, and then you notice that they're retweeting other people. So you follow down the line and you find other interesting people. I now follow nearly 2,000 people, and which is an awful lot of material going through my stream. People say to me, why do you follow so many people, or how can you follow so many people? It must be just overwhelming. But I don't see it that way. I love a thing that Stephen Fry said a few years ago, where he said that Twitter is like walking through a forest in autumn, and there are a lot of leaves falling down, and you can just get the general impression of the leaves falling down, or you can pick up one of them and examine it in detail. So that's sort of what I do. Or it's like dipping into a river. And the old line, a river is never the same twice. But you dip into the Twitter stream, and, I might just go and I could switch it on now and just go through maybe 40, 50 tweets, and I will find, inevitably, because I've been careful about the people that I follow, I'll inevitably find at least 5 or 6, and often many more, articles that I want to read, and I'll click on them and then I'll read them, and if they're really interesting, then I'll retweet them. And so it goes on. And, I retweet plenty from things that I read, through other means, by, going to the Guardian site or the New York Times site or wherever it may be. But, quite a large proportion of what I retweet now is just coming to me in the stream. And then there's still probably within that, there's probably 10% comes to me because people send it to me direct. Say, they put @Colvinius, you might be interested in this. So it's this fantastic, for a journalist, it's just the most fantastic source. Not only that, but we can talk much more about this. I'll just say briefly that you can also use it as a crowdsourcing tool. It's a bunch of things. It's just amazing.
Well, because many of us might initially think that social media is a young person's game. That it's
turned 60 last month.
Yeah, that it's about something that teenagers do. But in actual fact, the larger users are the 33 to 50 demographic. It's largely being used by professional people. You do have a lot of those tweets of I'm combing my hair or I'm having my cup of coffee, but a lot of it is that sort of information sharing that you talked about.
Yeah, and key to that, sorry to interrupt, but the key to that is I never see any of those. I'm combing my hair, I'm having a cup of coffee for breakfast, because I don't follow those people.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So it's not what, that's what, when you see articles attacking it, they're usually by people who don't use it or haven't learned to use it. They're attacking out of ignorance, really.
Yeah. Well, the two things that I want to pick up on. It has a relationship with the mainstream media, which you've talked about as being a dysfunctional, codependent kind of relationship. Yeah. Can you tell us about what you mean by that?
Well, because of the fact that the has fallen out of mainstream media money-wise, that they've really, and the 24-hour news cycle, like once upon a time you get your newspaper in the morning, your newspaper on the way home, as you got on the train, you saw the nightly news and that was pretty much it. But news is like 24/7 and there is less money around to produce more news. And when Twitter started to happen and Facebook, the mainstream media were very kind of generally, the ABC is an exception, were very kind of, what a waste of time and this is all just quite trite and, not of any value. But then they started to kind of hone in on it for, if somebody went missing, they would go to their Facebook site. If somebody came, their profile started to rise, they would be looking around at Twitter and Facebook to see what they could get, information, whether it was pictures. And then there's the offensorati thing. One of the things that the mainstream media often use to work out how well they're doing is how many clicks they're getting. So something called clickbait, where you put something up with a kind of inflammatory headline in order to get people to click on it. And so one of the things that they've found that people love to click on is anything which can be considered by any group as offensive. And so you've got the offensorati going, oh, this is outrageous, I can't believe this is going on. And then you've got the lefties hopping in and going, get over yourselves, keep your hair on. So as the shift has moved, like in the same way that I changed my opening page from The Age to Twitter so I could, get onto exactly what Mark was talking about, curated news and information and articles that I was interested in by people who had valuable kind of news sources themselves, that this thing just kind of shifted. I mean, if you go into newsrooms, they've got people's Twitter feeds up there just waiting, you know, going, oh, what are they talking about? What's coming next? You know, and a part of that really kind of annoys me, because journalists, unfortunately, can't but should be out there, you know, talking to people, getting proper stories. But these days, you know, the amount of times I get called, they say, oh, we'd like to do an interview. Can you just fill out this Q&A for me? So that you're actually writing it for them. They're so pushed for time, so many journalists, that they'll get just like a press release and just kind of top and tail it, and that's considered an article. So they are so reliant now on Twitter and Facebook to find out what's going in, and that is where the stories are breaking. They're breaking first on Twitter and Facebook. By the time you get a newspaper, it's just old news, and they are furious about it, because they have historically been the gatekeepers of information. They've been able to say, we will tell you what you're allowed to know, who is allowed to say it, when they're allowed to say it, in what way. Yes, you can go on the opinion page. No, you can go on the back page. No, we'll put you in the lifestyle section. And now that they've lost that power, they're furious, because if you've got a computer, you've got a voice. You've got a platform and you can say what you like. And it is the democratisation of information. And if it's good, people will stay with you. And if it's not good, they'll move away.
I think one of the things you're talking about there involves deadlines too, and newspapers still tend to be, right around the world, still tend to be locked into a single deadline at the end of a day. There are exceptions, and a lot of them are trying to be much more flexible. You know, The Guardian in London has really worked very hard on this stuff and tries to run a lot of live blogs, and a very good way. I mean, there are two ways you can follow the Leveson proceedings, the Lord Leveson's proceedings on the media in London. If it's not somebody you know, like Rupert Murdoch himself or Rebecca Brooks, where you would probably go to ABC News 24. But if it's just somebody, a lesser figure that you're interested in, you can go to Twitter and just go #Leveson, and you'll just get a big stream of people who are acting for you exactly like they're in the role that you know, a law court reporter has always been in. But you've got a big spread of them, you know, giving you different perspectives. But a lot of people just write down, you know, sentence by sentence what the witness is saying. It's fantastic, as I say, a journalistic resource once again. But the other way to get it would just be to go to the front page of The Guardian or maybe The Independent at certain times. You can't get onto The Times because although they have a very good reporter there, because it's behind a paywall. But you can pick up his tweets. So the cleverer mainstream media are trying to not fight fire with fire, but become part of the fire themselves, if you like. They are, and I think in many ways that if you work in radio, as I have most of my life, I've worked in radio, ABC radio and television, sort of half and half. But I've pretty much started in radio, and I've got radio in my blood. If you work in radio, then that idea of, you know, there's a bulletin every hour, or a short bulletin every half hour, that was already there for me. I never was worried about thinking, oh my God, I better not say this now because we've got a program at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
You know? And so for me, it is, while it is of course a medium on its own, it also became a sort of extension of broadcasting. It is a broadcast medium, in my view.
Well, in many ways, there's nothing all that radical about it. I mean, you've written about it. It's new, but it really, as far as using Twitter as part of journalism, relies on old and proven techniques. You're just sourcing information from another source.
Sure. Well, I can talk a bit about that too, because I said I started in 2009, and then I had that period in hospital where I really started to come to terms with it and started to behave in the way that I've been behaving ever since on Twitter. But it was also in 2009 that I started working out what a source it was of raw information, because it was in 2009 that Iran went to the polls in what turned out to be a rigged election. And then after that, the Green Movement started. Very soon after that, the Green Movement was an attempt at a sort of counter-revolution against the Ayatollahs and against Ahmadinejad. And as you probably remember, people came out in very large numbers onto the streets of Tehran. But the Iranians had refused to allow Western journalists in very large part. During that period, they kicked out John Lyon of the BBC, for instance, who was one of the ones who was there. So we had to try and work out what was going on. And there were quite a few people tweeting from Tehran, and there were also quite a few Persians, Iranians, outside Tehran who were in touch with Iranians inside the country, and they were tweeting in English rather than in Farsi. And so then you had the classic journalistic problem of trying to work out, who do you trust here? Who is telling the truth? Who's exaggerating? In any revolution or counter-revolution, there are wild claims made, there are exaggerations, so you had to try and work things out. So I started following a lot of people on Twitter, a lot of Iranians on Twitter, and what I found was quite amazing that you could follow a riot or a big demonstration that was being put down by the police, and you could, because you were covering a lot of people, you were starting to get a picture from literally different points of view, opposite sides of Ferdowsi Square or wherever. And there were different people saying different things, and lots of them were, as I say, slogans and so forth, but lots of them were just basic physical descriptions of what was going on. And you could cross-reference all of those, and by doing that, you could start to build up a real picture of actually what was going on. So we did that, and we were also able, there was a very poignant series of tweets from one person who was involved in all of this, and this was before Storyful got invented, but I just did a sort of equivalent of what Storyful does, arranged them into a little story, and we had them read, and that became part of one of our radio stories, So you were able to use it like that, but I would say that you have to be very careful, and I have written about this, as you say, to use the normal techniques of journalism, and that is to try and interrogate the material that you've got to work out whether it's true or not, and to be quite ruthless in eliminating what you think you can't rely on.
Mark, what's Storyful? I'm not familiar with it.
Storyful is just a... do I mean Storyful? Storyfy, sorry. Storyful is another site. Storyfy. It's just if you can go to Storyfy and you can rearrange a series of tweets and make them into a coherent story.
Right.
It's a useful little tool.
Great.
All right.
If you ever have time to do it.
We might bring in a few comments from our audience that we've received on Twitter and see if there's anything that you want to pick up on. One that I guess was picking up on what you were saying, there's a light and a dark side to giving everyone a voice.
Yes, there is. I'm with Mark about the amount of followers. I don't even know how many followers I have. Well, actually, that's not true. People tell me all the time. They say, do you know you've got X amount of followers? I'm thinking, I don't care. I just it's not about that for me. And there are people who will say, well, can you follow me? And I'm like, no. I'll follow you if I'm interested in you, or if I pick up that your tweets are of interest to me for whatever reason. If you have good links, if you have good information, if you're funny, if you've got it out there, I'm not just going to follow you. There's people will say to me, you don't respond enough with Twitter. You don't answer people's questions. Well, no, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be oppressed by social media. I see it for me basically as a bit of a monologue and a crowdsourcer and a scratching pad. If people want to listen, they can listen. But there is things like etiquette of people say, well, if I follow you, follow me. It's like, no, I don't. Sorry. And but that also has been explained to me that there is a currency with that too. If people see that you have a lot of followers but follow very few, people consider that you are worthwhile to follow because you don't have a lot of followers because you're following a lot of people. So I think that I believe in the democratisation of information, but yes, there are upsides and downsides. But there's the block button. You know, I believe in freedom of speech, but we also have the freedom not to listen. So I'm not into censorship, but I am into kind of selective listening. And more damage is done by giving offence than taking offence. So if I get... Actually, here's something that I've never even mentioned before. Sometimes if I hit the media for something that is supposedly, offensive or provocative or controversial, and this is something which is said about me constantly, oh, there goes Catherine Devaney trying to say something, provocative or controversial or offensive. You don't understand. I'm not trying to do anything. That's actually what I think. I say these things. I think they are the most normal and logical things in the world. And people think I'm sitting there going, what can I say which is controversial and provocative and offensive? So if something kind of hits the news and then I'll end up with, there'll be, dickheads in there, it's really good to flush out the dickheads. Because if you say something like that, it hits not your intended audience, but the second wave, you get people who are just haters. And as soon as they pop their head up, block, 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 block. And I don't block them because I don't like them. I don't block them because they're not agreeing with me. I just block them because they're idiots and they're haters. If they want to be idiots and haters, they can go elsewhere. I'm not going to give them the oxygen. They can hate someone else. I don't want them sitting around there because I don't think that's productive. I'm into let's get to the best possible place with the least amount of damage. And if you want to spend your time stalking and hating, do it to someone else, or you'll have to, find your own way around. So yes, light and dark, upsides and downsides, but I think the upsides well outweigh the dark sides.
All right. And we've got a question from another audience member to both panel members. Who is your favourite follower? Do you have a favourite follower?
Favourite person that I follow? Ooh, lots.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really hard, that one.
We're wanting tips here, I think.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll just pick one out. And that is a woman called Maria Popova, who works in New York, and she's just amazing. Her handle is @brainpicker, and she tweets about creative stuff, all kinds of...
Brain picking.
No, Brainpicker is her Twitter handle, and Brain Pickings is her blog, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do look at Brain Picker on Twitter every day. Yeah, it's extraordinary stuff because it's just so diverse, and it's about books and it's about ideas. She really likes design, just all kinds of stuff. I retweet her quite often, and I really enjoy looking at the stuff she does because it's interesting. She calls herself an interestingness curator.
I think that Chas Licciardello is a very good tweeter, and that's he's from Chaser, and he's a beautiful man too. But it's the length and breadth. You never actually hear anything about his personal life. He does very funny lines and very good links, and he's reliable. So when Neil
he also has Chas _USA because he's a complete American politics nerd. He really knows a hell of a lot about it. He's got a program on ABC News 24 as well about it with John Barron, and because it's an election year, I think it's on almost every day. But he's really good. That's called Chas _USA. That one.
I don't follow that one. There's some that I can see in my head. I can see the avatars, but I can't remember their names. So I'm dyslexic, so I see in pictures. So I can see some faces of people who I think are terrific, but I can't remember their names. But it's like if asking me who's my favourite, it's like killing babies. They're all good for different reasons because everyone I follow, I read almost everything that they tweet out, unless they start to me. And then I unfollow for a little while. You do. I think that's okay too. You'll follow someone for a while and they might be plugging something or, wonderful Ben POBG, when he was into MasterChef, he'd take up all the streams, so unfollow. And then he set up 2 accounts so he could do that, and so we could, if we weren't into MasterChef.
He's very funny, Ben POBG.
Yes, he's a very gifted writer too.
And you should follow First Dog on Moon. That's First Dog on the Moon from Crikey and John Kudelka. They're often very funny when they're just talking to each other. The 2 cartoonists. I mean, I'm just picking stuff out here and there.
We might just incorporate a couple of comments rather than questions from the audience. One is, Twitter changed the way I consume info and reduced the need to read crappy Australian papers. And on the other side, people can talk crap on any medium. It's the same issue anywhere.
I think that's an interesting thing to think about. If we think about the time that we spend on social media, where has that time come from? What were we doing before Twitter and Facebook? And I can tell you, for me, a lot of that time was spent watching bad television and reading bad newspapers and having bad conversation and being bored in queues. The people who say, oh, Facebook and Twitter, it's made the world very unsocial, people don't have a conversation anymore. Anyone who says that are people who don't have any friends. Because anyone who is somebody who is a person that you want to have contact with, you're just contacting them in another way. I can tell you right now, my mother-in-law, we gave her a Facebook. You know, they say if you want something done, you know, ask a busy person. No, if you want something done, give a pensioner an iPad. You know, she's now a huge activist in public housing, where she lives, Friends of Public Housing. She set up her own Twitter, Facebook. She's got her own, her own activism going on. That always really is interesting when you hear people saying, oh no, because it stops people, talking. Like, no, we're all talking, we're just not talking to you.
Because that's always the...
Or actually, more importantly, these are the people who want to be listened to. They are, oh, well, someone sit next to Uncle Joe at the barbecue because somebody has to listen to him. No, we don't have to listen to you anymore because we've got heaps of people on our phones or on our computers.
Yeah.
I think it's part of a much larger trend. I mean, I do find that I watch, the idea of appointment television, as they call it now, is almost dead, and it's not just because of Twitter, it's because of a whole lot of things. I watch a lot of television on this thing, or, using ABC iView on my television, certain other means I may or may not have for watching television programs. I'm only blaming my son for that. But, the world's changed, and Catherine's right, it's just taking up time mainly that you might have wasted before in many ways.
I can't believe we still have the 6 o'clock news. Like, isn't that extraordinary, considering that we just have news all the time, constantly, and still there... I mean, who are these, people coming home and getting their hound and their pipe and watching the 6 o'clock news? I mean, how long is that going to be around? It's quite seriously, I'm staggered that it's still around now.
See, I would have a different perspective on that because I present
PM
a
6
o'clock radio program.
No, I see radio as very different to television.
Yeah, I know, but even despite that, I actually think that there is still, while I am 24/7, I'm right round the clock listening to people, talking to people, and reading stuff and rebroadcasting it. I do think that it is actually quite a good idea to have a discrete program at the end of the day where you say, no, we are going to just, what we try, I mean, my philosophy is to put into the program more or less what I think is going to be in tomorrow's newspapers, or used to be in the newspapers, as it were. If you subscribe to the idea that newspapers are over as a medium. But one way or another, what we're trying to do is tomorrow's news today. And it's a way of ordering it all, and I think people do still like to have, and increasingly people like to have it on podcast, or, they stream it on TuneIn Radio on an iPad or an iPhone, listen to it later. There's all kinds of ways and times to consume it, but it isn't a bad idea to have news in a single package. That's my view.
You're right. I mean, I said that, and as you started to speak, I did realise that there has been something quite odd which has happened in our household in the last 3 weeks. We've started to watch the ABC 7 o'clock news again.
Yeah.
And it had been turned off for a long time. We used to watch it all the time. There's been a few years that we don't watch it, but now we all have dinner and then the news goes on at 7 o'clock. And with the appointment TV thing, I think about the television shows that I loved and the radio shows. The radio shows I'm actually more likely to listen to at that time because I can be washing the dishes and have them on the iPod, or riding the bike and listening to them as I go, or in the car, which is where a lot of listening goes on. And to have that kind of I don't know, that background music to our lives is kind of good. There was one of the great appointment television shows that I last watched before television kind of changed so dramatically, was a show called 6 Feet Under. And it was recommended by a lot of people, and it was on commercial television, which was something that made me think, well, it can't be any good. But it was a terrific show. And I remember hanging out to watch it every week. It was like there was no way I could see it until that time. And you'd be so excited, going, it's starting, let's hope the babies don't wake up, it's starting. And then it would be ending, and you go, oh no, I have to wait another week. And I do miss that delayed gratification. Whereas
but
now
what I don't miss, and we're getting slightly away from Twitter, but it's still the same kind of general area, what I don't miss at all was becoming addicted to The Sopranos, 10, 12 years ago, and then having to wait until 10 o'clock at night and watch it broken up with ads on Channel 9, and then turning it on at 10 o'clock the next week and finding that it started at 9:30 instead, and then turning it on the next week and finding they'd put it off to 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, frankly, mainstream media, and no doubt, you can include the ABC in this, there'll be cases. Mainstream media have no one but themselves to blame for what is happening to them in many ways, I believe. You have to get responsive to the audience. You have to say, and, now the ABC, and I'm not going to, it'll sound like I'm overpraising Mark Scott, whatever, because we have a great Twitter social media policy, and that is largely because Mark was determined to have an absolutely flexible, short, easy social media policy, and I think he's done a lot of good work. But, I noticed the other day that a couple of BBC TV programmes which had been shown on the ABC, and I was looking through the BBC schedules, and they were getting their first run in London 2 weeks after they got their first run here. You've got to do that. You've got to be up there because it's happening all over the world. Twitter is there. Everybody knows. I know, because I follow quite a few people in Britain, I know what's really hot and interesting on British TV, and, so do lots of you, and you want to see it soon, and American TV, and so on.
I'm going to open up in a moment for people in the audience who want to exercise vocal cords rather than thumbs, to give you an opportunity to ask some questions of panellists. But one major issue we haven't touched on yet that I would like you both to comment on is this notion of social media and Twitter as a way of influencing social change. The Arab Spring, for example. How much was Twitter important in all of that revolution that was happening, the activities throughout the Arab-speaking world? Because there seem to be two competing schools of thought. On the one hand, that Twitter and social media is a way of organising without an organisation, as it's been described. But on the other hand, it also provides a platform for us to be monitored. It also provides, as one commentator called it, how dictators watch us on the web. So, which side of that do both of you fall on? Is it more of a liberating technology, or is it something that we need to be careful of? Mark.
Douglas Adams said, he was very interested in the internet, and I had the good fortune to meet him before he died. On a visit to Australia about a decade ago, and he was an early uptaker of computer technology and very, very enthusiastic about the internet. And so he spent quite a lot of time involved in arguments with people who said the internet was just for porn or whatever. And he said...
It is very good for that, apparently.
And he said, look, the internet is just human nature. It's not good and it's not bad. It's just humanity. There's good in humanity, there's bad in humanity. At the time when that great porn debate was going on, I noticed, this is back in the mid-90s, I got onto the internet in 1994, and I loved all sorts of things. I remember from way back, and it's still there, a site called Bartleby.com, which is a repository of basically all of English literature. If you want to find a quote from Wordsworth or Shakespeare or whatever, you just go to Bartleby.com. It's there. The Oxford English Dictionary, I think. No, certainly the King James Bible, all that sort of stuff. There's just an enormous resource of anything that anyone wants on the internet, and the same is true about any part of the internet. I think that Twitter through, let's go back to Iran, you had lots of people talking to each other, and I don't think, let's not talk just about Twitter and Facebook, but also what they were using much more in Iran was networks of telephone networks. So they were telling each other on the telephone where they were going to meet up, and you could get 20,000 people like a flash mob just through that. You didn't need Twitter. But then what's happened since is that big companies like Siemens have sold them very sophisticated technology for monitoring telephone networks. And, if you don't have to do much to monitor Twitter or work out what people are doing. You don't have to do much to monitor Facebook either. And Facebook, I don't use Facebook anymore because I regard it as so irresponsible in the way that it treats the privacy of its users, and it is for me the single most egregious example of that line that if you are not the product on the internet, then you are, if you're not paying for the product, if you're not paying for the product on the internet, then you are the product.
Catherine?
I just think that I reiterate all of that. What I said at the start, human nature doesn't change, technology does. It's as simple as that. There is something that is quite odd, though. When I started to write columns for The Age, there would be mail that came in, mail that was, said wonderful things, mail that gave me more information, and mail that said, I hate you and hope you die and I'd like to see your head on a stick. And what is interesting, and at the time there was reader feedback, so you got sent everything that was written, whether it was handwritten or whether it was emailed to you. And it is quite bizarre when you say something and people are talking about you on the internet and you don't know who they are. It's like, being a fly on the wall at a dinner party with all these people slagging you off. So it is amazing. You could walk through your whole life before something like Twitter and Facebook without really knowing what people thought about you, or without even knowing the other side of your opinion or what the opposition is to your opinion. You're very well armed with what the opposition is to you and what you do if you're on social media. So human nature doesn't change, technology does, and it will continue to change. People will use whatever they can. I mean, particularly with the Arab Spring, these were people were desperate to get their information out, whatever it took.
And I'll just add one thing about the Arab Spring, is that we were able to use probably just about more than any other news outlet. PM was able to use the internet thanks to my colleagues Jess Hill and Connie Aegis. They did the most extraordinary job of reaching out to people in North Africa and the Middle East who got back in touch with us. And again, it was a question of working ordinary journalistic techniques. You had to make them trust you, actually. That was much more the problem there. And because there were people out there saying, oh no, don't trust them, they're stooges for Assad or Gaddafi, whoever. But we just got the most amazing material out of that. People who got in touch with us through Twitter and Facebook, and then we would speak to them on Skype, which was still relatively secure then. I believe it's a little more dubious now. And then we would be able to do interviews with people, under siege in cities like Misrata. People that I would never, ever have been able to get hold of before, unless I had been travelling the Middle East myself for a long, long time and built up, years and years of contacts. But we were just getting, 19-year-old American Libyans who'd come back and were now, under artillery fire. Extraordinary stuff.
And we've had several people comment on your gratuitous Douglas Adams quote, unquote, on the Twitter feed. So, but let's have open up for some gratuitous vocal cord quotes or questions. Do we have anyone without a mobile phone and a Twitter account who would like to ask a question of our panellists?
This one down the front, Neil?
Down the front here.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when you mentioned about sort of leaves falling, if you use another example, and information on Twitter is like sort of snowflakes falling, do you sometimes feel though you're under an avalanche and there's just not an opportunity to even breathe? You're not getting a sense of it, which is all lovely and romantic, but you are under it. You've gone to sleep for 12 hours and oh my God, look what's happened. How do you deal with that?
I'll repeat the question for those who may not be out here at the back. The image that we heard earlier about Twitter of the autumn leaves falling down and you select to leave. If they were snowflakes, do you feel that at times you're under an avalanche? How's your avalanche, Mark?
Well, I don't personally. I'm a very fast reader, and I can just zoom. I'm used to that. You know, I've been doing that all my life, actually, speed reading and just extracting the marrow out of stuff. But I absolutely accept that other people don't like that. You know, Tony Martin, the comedian down in Melbourne, I believe, has restricted himself only to following ever 12 people, just an arbitrary number. And so, you know, you can do different things. If you don't want to be buried under an avalanche, don't follow a lot of people. And if you do want to follow a lot of people, then divide them up. Have lists. I don't personally use lists, but everybody I know who uses lists...
I don't use lists either. But
everyone I know who
does
swears by them. I prefer that kind of unmediated stream of stuff coming through, and I'll just... You know, when I've been asleep for 8 hours, I'll turn it on and I'll just zoom through and I'll just start to see little patterns emerging somehow. And so you pick up quite quickly. If there's a really big story breaking that has happened while you were asleep, you start to pick that up quite quickly. That's the way I use it.
You do get out of bed first, though, don't you?
No. Certainly not. No, I'm afraid I'm absolutely hooked on this thing. I turn on the iPad when I wake up, and I lie there for a while thinking about the world and reading stuff and looking for, you know, interesting stuff. Sometimes I might just stop and read a long piece or whatever, but I'll do all that before I have my first cup of coffee, yeah.
Okay. And what about your avalanche, Catherine?
Well, I don't follow a lot of people. I know what you mean when you talk about an avalanche, but this is our challenge now. Once upon a time, everything was censored and we were restricted to only certain kinds of information. It's now up to us to be grown-ups and to choose how we consume our media and how we consume our information and how we interact socially. There is sometimes where you can get very hooked on a story, or even like a hashtag, like my sex life in a movie. So it would be like, you know, people would put out like, what is like a movie title that represents their sex life, you know, like, you know, the 40-year-old virgin, or, you know, men that stare at goats or whatever. And so they can be really, you know, like people would just write stuff like, you know, Snatch or I can't even think, you know, 3 Men and a Baby, or, yeah, I mean, and it will just, you know, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, and those things can be really fun, and they're often, if it's like a really boring afternoon, and like there are things like when Andrew Bolt, it came out that Andrew Bolt was going to have his own television show. He's a tabloid hack, you may or may not have heard of him, and it was like we heard that he was going to have a television show, and then suddenly it was like, what, you know, Bolt show, and everyone was putting up what they thought the titles would be, and that's really fun. You know, that's just like everybody just kind of heckling each other and trying to one-up each other, and that stuff can be quite addictive, but it's up to us. We're going to be grown-ups about this, about, you know, when we turn off and when we turn on. It is difficult at times because I do think it is quite addictive. I've been thinking recently there's something a bit pokey-ish about it. If you don't have much going on and you're just kind of sitting there, you can, like Mark's doing, you know, flick, refresh, you know, go back and forward and search things. I remember one of my kids once had like one of those little, I don't know, it was just like a little electronic thing. It was like a snail that had, like, you pushed certain buttons and colours and lights came up and music. And I thought, this is like a pokey machine. And I think that there is a kind of a bit of a Twitter thing that can be a bit like a pokey machine. I'm not a big fan of Facebook either. I like the short, sharp, accessible, you know, don't mess about. And I think there is something, Twitter is better at flushing out the dickheads than Facebook is.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, over here.
I don't use Twitter, and perhaps this question follows on from the last one. I'm just wondering about the all-consuming, well, I'm guessing, perhaps the all-consuming nature of it. I was particularly interested in your comment, Catherine, about people you block. Does it also mean that if somebody, shall we say, respectfully disagrees with what you say, you find you don't have time to even engage with?
Oh, no, I don't. But a lot of people do.
I have lots of conversations with people. I try to keep it very civil, and generally, because I keep a certain... See, I'm completely different from Catherine in the way I tweet too, because I'm not really representing myself only. I'm representing my program as well. So I have to obey a few, you know, basic ABC rules, and I can't tell anybody to piss off. But I think people pick up on that over time. Most of the people who talk to me talk, politely. I don't ask for any more respect than anybody else, but I just don't, one thing I think probably feeds into that is that I never use text talk. I never abbreviate a word. I try to, and with the links that I do, what I try to do quite often is just to do what a headline writer would do in a newspaper, or say something funny or clever or make you go and read it. But generally, I try to keep the tone quite high, and so I do have quite a lot of conversations, yeah.
If somebody has got like a really good, if I look at the replies, which I don't do very much, and if somebody does have it's saying, hey, how about, and I go, good point. Like if I have time, and occasionally I do, I will have dialogue, but the thing is that with everything now, even if you write a column, it's just the start of the conversation. And the conversation is to keep going. So I might say something or tweet something and someone might go, well, that's not inclusive, that's forgetting this, or that's not a very sophisticated angle. And then they can go off and continue that on themselves. And so that's one of the great things with the sharing. I don't feel any obligation to respond. I do if I feel like it occasionally, but I do like it when I can just go, oh, these people are just haters who are just searching around going, I want to have access to somebody who is threatening, their views are threatening to me, so I'm just going to be a pest. It's like, be a pest to somebody else.
But, I hardly ever block anyone, and I just think that the fact that Catherine and I are so different in the way we use the medium is just another example of how it's not really, it doesn't dictate anything to you. It's absolutely flexible. I know people who only look at it once a day, and I look at it all the time because it's fully integrated into my work. So you can do whatever you like.
We've got time probably just for one quick final question, if you can be quick.
By sheer nature, we love to be surrounded by people who agree with us, and in a world where we have Google with algorithms that will decide on what is most relevant to you, are we somehow limiting the exposure to alternate views of the world through deciding your Twitter feeds and to personalised searches?
Okay, the question is, are we limiting exposure to alternative points of view, or are we perhaps opening them up?
By curating the information that we have. I think we've always done it, and I think we always will. I think that less so now. You don't just have 4 television channels and maybe 2 newspapers if you're lucky where you live. So yes, perhaps we do limit ourselves, but perhaps we limit ourselves more broadly.
I've tried as a journalist to put myself in a position where people aren't going to listen to my program and think, oh, I know how he votes, so this interview is going to be thoroughly biased. So I try to, and also I really haven't made up my mind on a lot of things. I don't follow any particular political party. I do have divergent views on lots and lots of different policies and lots of different things. So I quite often, when there is a political debate going on, find myself retweeting 2 exactly opposite views on the same thing. So because I think that, I think that's one of the reasons why people follow me, is because there is a stream of stuff coming through which isn't necessarily predictable. I try to be relatively unpredictable, and, I'd like to be brain picker, a curator of interestingness.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think we've come to the end of our allotted 60 minutes. We've trawled through a lot of issues, and I hope you've all found it greatly interesting. We've also got the image next time you do happen to log on and receive one of Mark's tweets that he may be lying in bed naked.
Oh, no. I do wear clothes.
Would you please join me in thanking Catherine and Mark?